The two guards slammed Marcus Bennett face first into the marble wall so hard his tools scattered across the floor like dropped teeth. On your knees. Hands behind your head. Now. A single father, who'd never so much as gotten a parking ticket, was being treated like an armed intruder on the 90th floor of Chicago's richest tower. And the billionaire he'd supposedly attacked. She was staring at him, not screaming, not pointing, just staring like she'd seen a ghost she recognized. Then, while the whole world waited for her to destroy him, Claire Whitmore whispered two words that made no sense. Don't leave. Before you go further, drop the city you're watching from in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. And if you believe the person who saves your life is rarely the person you expect, subscribe and stay with me to the very end. The elevator wasn't supposed to be running. Marcus Bennett stood in the freight corridor of the Whitmore Tower with a work order glowing on his cracked phone screen, and every instinct in his body told him something about it was wrong. It was 11:52 at night. The tower was dead. And the request on his screen wasn't from the maintenance dispatch system he'd used for 6 years. It came through as a raw text, no ticket number, no supervisor name. Executive Floor 90. Climate control failure in the private suite. Immediate response required. Immediate response, he muttered, at midnight on a Friday. He should have called it in. He knew that later, replaying it 1,000 times, he would tell himself he should have called somebody. But it was the last shift before his weekend with Nia, and if he flagged it and waited for a callback, he'd be here until 2 in the morning, and his 8-year-old daughter was already asleep in a neighbor's spare room across town. And every hour he spent in this building was an hour Nia woke up in a bed that wasn't hers, in a home that wasn't theirs. So he did what he always did. He put his head down and went to fix the problem. In and out, he told himself, pressing the freight elevator call button. Fix it, log it. Go get your kid. The elevator opened before he finished the thought, which was strange because that elevator never came that fast, and Marcus stepped inside without letting himself wonder why. He was 39 years old. He had been invisible in this building for 6 years, and he had made peace with it. The men and women who rode the passenger elevators wore suits that cost more than his truck. They stepped around him in the hallways the way you step around a wet floor sign. He fixed their heat and cooled their offices and unclogged their imported espresso machines, and not one of them had ever asked his name. Marcus didn't hate them for it. Hate took energy, and he was saving all of his for one person. He pulled her photo up on his phone as the elevator climbed. Nia gap-toothed front teeth just growing back and holding up a drawing of the two of them as stick figures under a purple sun. He'd taped the original to the dashboard of his truck. He looked at the photo the way other men looked at the time. Almost done, baby girl, he whispered. The doors opened on 90. Marcus had never been on the executive floor. In 6 years, not once. The air up here was different, cooler, softer, like the building itself held its breath. His work boots felt loud on the floor. Every step announced you don't belong here, and he kept walking anyway because there was a job with his name on it and a child waiting. He found the private suite at the end of a long, silent hall. The door was ajar. That was the second wrong thing. Executive doors didn't sit open. They locked automatically. They required badge access he didn't have. But this one hung open 2 inches warm, light spilling into the corridor, and the work order in his hand said, Private Suite. And Marcus Bennett, who had spent his entire life doing exactly what he was told, because doing what you were told was how a black man kept a steady job and a roof over his daughter's head, pushed the door the rest of the way open and said the 2 words he'd said 10,000 times in 6 years. Maintenance. Hello. He would hear those 2 words in his nightmares. Because on the other side of the door was Claire Whitmore, and Claire Whitmore was on the floor. She was half turned away from him. One shoulder, bare a silk blouse clutched against her chest, her other hand pressed flat to the floor, like the room was tilting, and only her palm was holding it level. Her breath came in short, sharp, gasping pulls. Her eyes were huge, and for one endless second, the two of them just stared at each other. The billionaire who owned the tower, and the maintenance worker who'd walked into the worst possible moment of her night. I'm sorry. Marcus started already backing up, already raising his hands. The work order, climate, I'll go. Don't. Her voice cracked. It came out of her before she could stop it, some raw animal reflex under all that money and power. Don't leave. Marcus froze in the doorway. Every part of his brain that had been trained by 39 years of hard experience screamed at him to run. A billionaire white woman is half-dressed on the floor of a private suite, and you are a black man alone with her at midnight, and there is no witness and no camera you can trust, and if this goes wrong, it does not just go wrong, it ends you. He knew that math. He'd known that math since he was 12 years old. But she couldn't breathe. That was the thing his body understood before his fear did. She wasn't looking at him like a predator. She wasn't looking at him with disgust or outrage. She was looking at him the way Nia looked at him when she woke up from a nightmare and needed to know somebody was there. She was drowning right there on dry land, and she'd said, "Don't leave." "Okay," Marcus said very slowly, very quietly, keeping his hands where she could see them. "Okay, I'm not leaving. I'm right here. Ma'am, I need you to breathe with me. Can you do that?" "I can't," she gasped. "I can't get air." "Yes, you can. You're getting air right now. You're just going too fast." He crouched, staying near the door, keeping distance, keeping his voice low and even, the exact voice he used at 3 a.m. when a small body climbed into his bed shaking. "In through your nose. Slow. Count with me. 1, 2, 3. Her chest hitched. "Good. Now let it out. Slower going out than coming in. 4, 5, 6. You don't..." A tear cut down her face. "You don't understand if anyone sees..." "Nobody's here but me and I'm nobody," Marcus said. "In 2, 3, come on now, you're doing it." He watched the billionaire richest woman he'd ever stood in a room with follow the breathing instructions of a man whose name she didn't know, and slowly over 1 minute over 2, the gasping loosened. Her shoulders came down from around her ears. The wild light in her eyes dimmed to exhaustion. "There you go," Marcus said gently. "There you go. You're all right." Claire Whitmore pressed the silk blouse tighter to her chest and let out a long, shaking breath, and for the first time she looked at him, really looked focused, present, and Marcus watched the horror arrive on her face as she understood exactly what this looked like. "Oh God," she breathed. "You have to..." That was when the alarm went off. It didn't ring. It shrieked a sound engineered to freeze a human being in place, splitting the silence of the 90th floor, and Marcus's whole body locked, because he knew before the doors at the end of the hall even burst open. "Security, don't move." They came in fast, 4 of them black tactical gear flashlights up, and the first one hit Marcus before Marcus had a chance to raise his hands higher than they already were. His shoulders slammed the doorframe, a knee drove into his back. His face met the marble, and his tools went skittering across the floor, and a voice was screaming in his ear, "Hands behind your head! Get down! Get down!" "I'm down," Marcus shouted, cheek against cold stone. "I'm down. I'm not resisting. My hands are. I'm a maintenance worker. I have a work order. It's on my phone." "Shut up. It's on my phone." I said, "Shut your mouth." And there it was. The oldest, coldest fear he carried come to life on the 90th floor of a building he'd kept warm for 6 winters. Marcus went still. Not because they told him to. Because he had learned the way every man like him learned that stillness was the only thing that kept you breathing. He pressed his cheek to the floor, and he did not move a muscle, and he thought with a clarity that frightened him more than the knee in his spine. "Nia. If this goes wrong, who takes Nia?" "Sir, we've got the suspect contained." One of the guards spoke into his radio, standing over Marcus like a hunter over a kill. "CEOs secure. Male intruder, unauthorized access to the executive floor. We're calling CPD." "No," Claire's voice. The guard turned. "Ma'am." Marcus from the floor saw her get to her feet. She had pulled the blouse on, now buttoned crooked, and she stood there swaying slightly with one hand braced against the wall, and she said it again louder, in a voice that had climbed back into itself, a voice that ran a company. I said no. Nobody is calling anyone. Get off him. The guard didn't move. Ms. Whitmore, this man breached a secure floor. Protocol requires... He didn't breach anything. Her jaw was tight. He was called up here. There's no work order in the system, ma'am. We checked before we came up. There's no dispatch, no ticket, no authorization. This man used a freight elevator that should have been locked on a floor he has no clearance for, and we found him standing over you while you were... The guard stopped himself, but everyone in the room heard the end of the sentence anyway. Marcus felt it land in his stomach like a stone. Standing over you while you were. Show them the phone, Marcus said quietly into the floor. It's in my right chest pocket. The work order. Show them. A guard yanked the phone out, held it up. The screen was still glowing. Everyone leaned in. The text was gone. Marcus felt the floor drop out from under his whole life. It was there, he said, and hated how his voice shook. It was right there an hour ago. It was right there. Someone sent me a text floor 90 climate control. Immediate response. It was right there. There's nothing on this phone but photos of a kid, the guard said flatly. And something in the way he said a kid dismissive like Marcus's daughter was evidence of desperation rather than the reason he breathed made Marcus's hands curl into fists against the marble. That's my daughter, he said. Low, steady. You watch how you say that. Threatening now, another guard noted. I'm not... Enough. Claire crossed the room. She was steadier on her feet now, and when she reached the guard holding the phone, she held out her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, he gave it to her. She looked at the screen. She scrolled. She saw the photo of Nia. And Marcus watched something move across the billionaire's face that he couldn't name recognition maybe, or grief, or the particular exhaustion of someone who had spent her whole life being lied to and had just learned somehow to tell the difference. What's your name? She asked him. Marcus turned his head as far as the knee in his back would allow. Marcus. Bennett. Ma'am, if you tell them to let me up. Let him up. Ma'am, let him up, Claire said, and this time the CEO was fully back in the room and the temperature of her voice dropped 10 degrees. Now, or every one of you can explain to my board why you assaulted a member of my building staff on my personal instruction to stand down. The knee came off his back. Marcus rose slowly, hands still visible, moving the way you move around frightened animals and armed men, which in his experience were sometimes the same thing. His shoulder throbbed. His lip was split and bleeding where it had met the marble. He picked up his scattered tools with shaking hands one at a time, because a man who left his tools behind never got them back, and he was not going to lose his tools on top of everything else. Mr. Bennett, Claire said, look at me. He looked at her. Did you send yourself that work order? No, ma'am. Do you know who did? No, ma'am. He met her eyes and held them because he had learned that too, that looking away read as guilt to people who'd already decided you were guilty. I got a text. Floor 90 climate emergency, come now. That's it. I came up, the door was open. I called out, and I found... He stopped, chose his words like each one was a step across a frozen river. I found you needed help. That's all that happened. On my daughter's life, that's all that happened. The room was silent, except for the whisper of the climate system that Marcus noticed distantly was running perfectly fine. There was nothing wrong with the climate control on the 90th floor. There never had been. Somebody had built this, brick by brick. Somebody had sent that text, unlocked that elevator, propped that door, and timed it to the exact minute the most powerful woman in Chicago would be alone and undone on her own floor, and then made the evidence vanish the second security arrived. Marcus wasn't smart in the ways these people measured smart. He hadn't finished college. He read slow, but he had spent his whole life reading rooms, reading danger, reading the difference between an accident and a setup, and he knew a setup when he was standing in the middle of one. Somebody wanted me here, he said slowly. It came out of him almost against his will. Somebody wanted me to be the one who found you. So it would look like he couldn't finish it. Claire finished it for him very quietly. So it would look like a man broke into my suite and attacked me. Ms. Whitmore, the head of security said, with respect that is a serious accusation with no, get out. Ma'am, all of you, out, now. Mr. Bennett stays. They filed out. Slowly, reluctantly, throwing looks back over their shoulders, looks that told Marcus in no uncertain terms that whatever the CEO decided tonight in the eyes of those four men, he was already tried and already convicted, and if he was ever alone in a stairwell with any of them, he had better watch his back. The door closed. And then it was just the two of them again. The billionaire and the man nobody saw standing in a room where nothing was broken, and everything had been. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You're bleeding," Claire said finally. Marcus touched his lip, looked at the red on his fingers. "I've had worse." "Sit down, please." "Ma'am, I don't think I should sit down in your private suite. I think you understand better than anybody why I shouldn't." She flinched a small thing quickly hidden, but he saw it. She saw that he saw it. And something honest passed between them, in that recognition, some acknowledgement of the whole ugly architecture of the world. They were both standing inside the architecture that meant a woman crying on the floor and a man kneeling to help her could become in the space of 90 seconds a headline that destroyed them both. "You could have run," Claire said. "When you saw me on the floor, you knew what it looked like. You knew what could happen to you. Any sensible man would have turned around and walked out that door and pretended he never saw a thing." She studied him. "Why didn't you?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. When he answered, he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at nothing at the middle distance, at some memory that lived behind his eyes. "2 years ago I came home from a double shift," he said. "My wife Denise, she'd been having headaches, bad ones. We kept saying we'd get it checked when we had the money for the copay, when we had the time." He swallowed. "I found her on the kitchen floor. She'd been there, the doctor said she'd been there maybe 40 minutes. And our neighbor Mrs. Alvarez, she'd knocked. She'd heard something fall, and she stood outside our door, and she thought, it's not my business, I shouldn't get involved, and she went home." His voice didn't rise. It just got very level and very hard. 40 minutes. If somebody had come in, if one person had just come in and not worried about how it looked, he stopped. "So no," he said. "When I saw you on that floor, and you couldn't breathe, I wasn't going to be the person who worried about how it looked and walked away. I'd rather they arrest me. I'd rather lose the job." He finally looked at her. "I've already learned what it costs to be the person who doesn't come in." Claire Whitmore, who was worth more money than the entire city block, Marcus lived on, who had negotiated with heads of state and gutted competitors without blinking, stood in the middle of her private suite and could not say a single word. Because for the first time in longer than she could remember, someone had walked into her worst moment and stayed, not to take a photograph, not to leverage it, not to whisper it to a journalist or a rival or a board member, but simply because she was a human being on the floor who couldn't breathe. "I have panic attacks," she said. The words came out flat and fast, like ripping off a bandage. "That's what you saw. That's the great secret of Claire Whitmore. I have panic attacks, and they've been getting worse, and I hide them because in my world, weakness is blood in the water. If my board found out, if it got out, that I fall apart on the floor of my own office at midnight, they'd have grounds to question whether I'm fit to run this company. And there are people who want exactly that." Her jaw tightened. "There are people who would give anything to have found what you found tonight." Marcus took that in, turned it over, and came slowly to the same place she had. "And somebody almost did," he said. "Somebody almost had a maintenance man they could pin it on. Somebody almost had a maintenance man they could pin it on." She agreed quietly. "The intruder story, the struggle, the lie writes itself. And you'd have gone to prison, Mr. Bennett, and I'd have been removed from my own company, and whoever built this would have had exactly what they wanted." She looked at him. "You weren't the target, you were the tool, and I think we were both very nearly destroyed tonight by the same hand." The word prison sat in Marcus's chest like a swallowed coal. He thought about Nia, waking up in a stranger's spare bed. He thought about her waking up to the news that her father, the only parent she had left, had been arrested for attacking a billionaire in her own tower. He thought about how fast that story would have moved, how completely it would have buried the truth. How absolutely no one would have believed the maintenance man over the CEO if the CEO had wanted him buried. His hands started to shake. Not from fear now, from the sheer staggering nearness of it. He had walked to the very edge of losing everything. His freedom, his name, his daughter, all of it, over a text message someone had sent him and then deleted. And the only thing that had saved him was that the woman he'd supposedly attacked had decided for reasons he still didn't fully understand to believe him. "Why?" he asked her. His voice was rough. "Why do you believe me? You don't know me. Everything, the phone, the elevator, the door, all of it, everything says I'm guilty. Your own security wanted to put me in cuffs. Why did you tell them to let me up?" Claire was quiet for a long moment. "Because of your face," she said finally. "When you walked in the door and saw me on the floor. I've spent 20 years reading faces across boardroom tables. It's the whole job, really learning to see what people actually feel underneath what they're paid to show me. And in that first second before you said a word, I saw your face." She held his gaze. "It wasn't guilt, Mr. Bennett. It wasn't hunger. Men who want something from me, I know that look. I've seen it 10,000 times. What I saw on you was fear. And under the fear," she paused, "concern. For me. You were afraid and you were still worried about the woman on the floor. You can't fake both of those at once. I've never once seen a man manage it." Marcus didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. "Someone in this building tried to end me tonight," Claire went on. And now her voice had changed. The fear was gone, replaced by something colder and more dangerous. The voice of a woman who had clawed her way to the top of an empire and did not intend to be shoved off it in the dark. "They tried to end you too, as collateral. And they nearly succeeded. So I'm going to ask you a question, Marcus Bennett, and I want you to think hard before you answer, because a great deal depends on it. Ask it. Whoever did this is still in my building, still on my board, or my staff, or my payroll, still watching. And now they know it didn't work. They know I stood you down instead of letting them frame you, which means they know that I know something is wrong." She stepped closer. "That makes both of us targets now. You because you're a loose thread who can testify a work order existed. Me because I'm the prize. The smart thing, the safe thing would be for me to pay you to disappear. Give you enough money to move your daughter somewhere far away and forget this ever happened. Never see each other again. You'd be safe. I'd deal with the rest alone." "But you're not going to offer me that," Marcus said. He could hear it in her voice. "No," Claire said. "I'm not. Because the person who did this counted on everyone in my life either wanting something from me or being afraid of me. And tonight, for the first time in years, I met a man who was neither." She looked at him steadily. "I need someone I can trust inside these walls. Someone who has no stake in my board, no eye on my company, no reason to lie to me. Someone who already knows my worst secret and chose to help instead of use it." A breath. "I want to hire you, Mr. Bennett. Not as maintenance. I want you where you can see what I can't because you're the only person in this building I have a reason to believe is exactly what he appears to be." Marcus stared at her. "I fix elevators," he said. I'm not a security expert. I'm not an investigator. I'm a maintenance tech with a high school diploma and a kid, ma'am. I don't know the first thing about." "You knew a setup when you were standing in the middle of one," Claire said. "My $4,000 a day security consultants walked into this room tonight and saw exactly what they were meant to see. You walked in and saw the truth in under 2 minutes. That's not a diploma, Mr. Bennett. That's not something I can hire out of a firm. That's a man who's spent his whole life having to read danger before it reaches him because the cost of missing it was too high." Her voice softened just slightly. "I have spent my entire career surrounded by people who are brilliant and educated, and I cannot trust a single one of them. I would trade all of them for one man I could." The room was silent. Marcus thought about the money. He couldn't help it. A man with an 8-year-old and rent 3 weeks late thought about the money the way you think about air when you're running out of it. Whatever she was going to pay, it was more than he made, and it would mean Nia's own bed in a home that was theirs, and no more nights waking up in strangers' spare rooms, and maybe someday a college fund, a real one, a future. And he thought about the danger. Someone in this building had tried to erase him tonight and had come within one merciful decision of succeeding. Saying yes meant staying inside the thing that had nearly swallowed him. It meant painting a target on his own back, and by extension, on his daughter's. "If I say yes," Marcus said slowly, "and this goes bad, and you and I both know it could go bad, my daughter has nobody. You understand that? Her mother's gone, her grandparents are gone. There's me. Just me. If something happens to me, Nia goes into a system that eats kids like her alive. So before I say a single word, I need you to understand exactly what you're asking me to risk. It's not my neck. My neck's not the expensive thing anymore. It's hers." Claire Whitmore looked at the man in front of her, split lip shaking hands, second-hand work boots, a phone full of drawings of a gap-toothed little girl under a purple sun, and Marcus watched the last of the CEO drain out of her face and something else take its place. Something he hadn't expected to see on the 90th floor of the richest tower in Chicago. He watched her decide to make him a promise. "Then here is what I'll do," Claire said quietly. "If you say yes, your daughter is protected the same as you, better than you. If anything happens to you while you're working for me, there is a fund with her name on it that no one can touch. Not my board, not the courts, not my own brother, enough that she never wants for anything, as long as she lives, and enough that she never, ever ends up in the system you're afraid of. I'll have my attorney draft it before you leave this floor tonight, and I'll sign it in front of you, and it will be irrevocable." She held his eyes. "I don't have children, Mr. Bennett. I don't have a family I trust. But I know what it is to build your whole life around protecting one thing. Yours is your daughter. Mine is this company. And tonight both were nearly taken from us by the same person. So I'm not asking you to trust me. Trust is earned, and I haven't earned anything. I'm asking you to let me put it in writing." For a long moment, Marcus Bennett didn't answer. He was thinking about Denise on the kitchen floor. About 40 minutes and one closed door. About all the times in his life he'd been the man nobody saw, nobody named, nobody believed. And about how tonight one time being invisible had nearly cost him everything. And one woman's decision to actually look at him had been the only thing standing between his daughter and a life without a father. He was thinking about how strange it was that the person who'd nearly destroyed him and the person who'd saved him had been the same accident, the same open door, the same two words whispered across a room. "Don't leave." He'd stayed, and staying had put him here at the edge of a cliff, being offered a hand by a stranger. "Nia," he said finally. "My daughter. Her name is Nia. If we're going to do this, if I'm going to trust you with my life and hers, then you're going to say her name. Not your daughter, not the kid. Her name." Claire Whitmore didn't hesitate. "Nia," she said. "She'll be protected, Marcus. On my life. Nia will be protected." And in the silence that followed on the 90th floor of a building, he had kept warm and lit and running for 6 invisible years. Marcus Bennett, single father widower. The man everyone had been so ready to drag away in cuffs, looked at the most powerful woman he had ever met, and understood that his quiet, careful, head-down life had just ended. Whatever came next, there was no going back to the basement. There was no going back to being nobody. Somebody in this building had tried to make him the villain of a story he didn't even know he was in. And Marcus was done being the person things happened to. He extended his hand, the same hand that had been pinned to the marble 20 minutes earlier, and Claire took it, and the two of them shook, and neither one of them noticed the small red light of a camera in the corner of the suite blink once and go dark. Someone else had been watching the whole time, and that someone was already smiling. The papers were signed by 2 in the morning. Claire's attorney arrived in a rumpled coat with sleep still creasing his face, and he did not ask why his boss needed an irrevocable trust drafted at that hour in that room for the benefit of a child named Nia Bennett he had never heard of. He simply did what he was paid to do, and when it was done, Claire signed her name, and Marcus signed his beneath it, and the lawyer notarized both signatures and left without a word. "It's real now. Claire said, sliding Marcus's copy across the table. "Whatever else happens, that's real. No one can undo it." Marcus folded the papers carefully and put them in his chest pocket over his heart, the same pocket that had held the phone with the vanished work order. "Then I guess I work for you now." "You work with me," Claire corrected. "There's a difference. I have 400 people who work for me. I'm looking for one who'll tell me the truth." Marcus went home that night to the walk-up on the west side where he and Nia lived, where the radiator knocked and the hallway smelled like his neighbor's cooking, and he lay awake until the sun came up, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, turning the whole impossible night over in his mind. At 6, he drove across town and picked up Nia from Mrs. Okafor's apartment, and his daughter ran at him the way she always did, full speed, no brakes, trusting completely that he would catch her. "You look tired, Daddy," Nia said, studying his face with the frightening perception of an 8-year-old. Then softer, "What happened to your mouth?" Marcus had forgotten about the split lip. He touched it and made himself smile. "Bumped it at work, baby. It's nothing." Nia didn't look like she believed him. She never quite did. She'd learned in the 2 years since her mother died to watch her father for the small signs that something was wrong, and Marcus hated that she'd had to learn it. Hated that his little girl carried a worry no child should have to carry. "Is it a bad bump or a scary bump?" she asked. He crouched down to her level. "What's the difference? A bad bump you laugh about later. A scary bump you don't want to talk about." She put her small hand on his cheek, next to the split lip. "This is a scary bump. I can tell." Marcus looked at his daughter, really looked at her, the way Claire had looked at him, and understood that he could not lie to this child. Not about the big things. She'd know, and knowing he'd lied would frighten her more than any truth. "You're right," he said. "It was a scary bump. But here's the thing. Nia, something scary happened at work last night, and then something good happened right after, and the good thing is bigger than the scary thing. I got a new job. A better job. It means more money and a bed for you that's actually yours in a home that's actually ours. No more sleepovers at Mrs. Okafor's when I work late." He tucked a braid behind her ear. "Can you trust me that the good part is bigger?" Nia considered this with tremendous seriousness. "Will you still pick me up from school?" "Every day." "Then okay." She wrapped her arms around his neck. "I trust you." And Marcus held his daughter in the gray morning light and made himself a promise he did not know if he could keep, that whatever he had agreed to on the 90th floor, whatever danger he had walked into, he would find a way to keep this small trusting person on the safe side of it. He started Monday. Claire had given him a title that meant nothing and access that meant everything. On paper, he was a special operations coordinator reporting directly to the CEO, a vague enough designation that no one could question it, and specific enough that no one could stop him. In practice, he had a badge that opened every door in the building, a desk in an alcove off Claire's floor, and one job figure out who had tried to destroy them both before they tried again. The trouble was that everyone hated him. He felt it the first morning, the moment he stepped off the executive elevator in his one good shirt with a badge that said he belonged on a floor where he manifestly did not. The executive assistants stopped talking when he passed. The vice presidents looked at him like a stain. Word had traveled. Of course it had traveled the maintenance man who'd been caught in the CEO's suite at midnight and had somehow inexplicably not been fired or arrested but promoted, given the run of the building planted at the right hand of the Queen. The story wrote itself in their heads, and the story they wrote was ugly. "There he is," a voice murmured as he passed a knot of people by the coffee station. "Not quite quiet enough. The one from Friday night. I heard she's—" The rest was lost, but the laugh that followed told Marcus everything about what she was. He kept walking. He'd spent his whole life keeping walking. But it landed different now, because now there was a reason he had to be here, a reason bigger than his own pride, and every whisper made that reason harder. The head of security was named Grant Foss. He was one of the 4 men who'd put Marcus face down on the marble Friday night, and he had not forgiven Marcus for the crime of being right. When Marcus came to his office that first morning to ask for the building's access logs, Foss leaned back in his chair and looked at him for a long, insolent moment before he spoke. "So," Foss said. "The janitor." "Maintenance tech," Marcus said. "But I'll answer to either. I need the access logs from Friday night. Elevator activity badge swipes, camera archives. Everything from the 90th floor and the freight system going back a week. You need." Foss smiled without any warmth in it. "You know what your problem is, Bennett? You think a title changes what you are. It doesn't. Ms. Whitmore had a bad night and made a soft call, and when she comes back to her senses, you'll be back in the basement where you belong, and I'll still be running security in this building. So here's how this goes. You want logs, you file a request through proper channels, and I'll get to it when I get to it." Marcus had expected this. He'd braced for it on the drive in. "That's interesting," he said mildly, "because Ms. Whitmore told me you'd say something like that. And she told me to tell you. If you did that, she'd like a full written explanation on her desk by end of day of why there was no work order in the system Friday night for a climate emergency. On the 90th floor, an emergency your team responded to in under 4 minutes, which is impossible unless somebody knew it was coming." He let that sit. "Because I've been thinking about that, Mr. Foss. 4 minutes. From the ground floor security desk to the 90th floor through locked doors in full tactical gear in under 4 minutes. Somebody had your team pre-positioned. Somebody told them to be ready. And I'd sure like to know who that was. Wouldn't you?" The smile came off Foss's face. "Are you accusing me of something?" "No, sir," Marcus said. "I'm asking you for the logs. Because if you're clean, and I hope you are, those logs are the fastest way to prove it. And if you won't give them to me, I've got to ask myself why a clean man wouldn't want to prove he's clean." He set a slip of paper on the desk. "That's Ms. Whitmore's direct line. She's expecting your call if there's a problem. They're a problem." For 3 seconds, Grant Foss looked at Marcus Bennett with pure, undisguised hatred. Then he picked up the paper, crumpled it in his fist, and said through his teeth, "You'll have your logs by noon." Marcus got the logs by noon. He took them back to his alcove and spread them across the desk. And he did the thing he was actually good at. The thing no diploma taught. He read them the way he'd read a failing HVAC system, looking not for what was there, but for what didn't fit. He didn't understand half the technical notation, so he taught himself. Sitting there, hour after hour, cross-referencing, asking dumb questions of a junior IT tech named Priya, who took pity on him and explained what a badge audit trail was and how the elevator control system logged its commands. And slowly over 2 days, the picture came together, and it was worse than he'd feared. "It's clean," he told Claire on Wednesday night, standing in her office with the pages spread across her glass table. "That's what's wrong with it. It's too clean. Look, the freight elevator that came to get me Friday night. According to the log, it was locked. Out of service. It never moved." He pointed. "But I wrote it. You saw me get pulled off it. So either I'm lying, or somebody went into the elevator control system and erased the record of it running. And you can't do that from a phone in the parking garage, Claire. You do that from inside, from an administrator account." Claire looked at the page. Her jaw was tight. "Whose account?" "That's the thing. The command came through the master facilities account, which is a shared login. 6 people have it, and there's no way from these logs to know which of the 6 was actually sitting at the keyboard." Marcus shook his head. "Whoever did this knew that. They used the one account that couldn't point back at a single person. That's not luck. That's somebody who knows this building's systems better than I do, and I've been maintaining them for 6 years. So it's someone in facilities or IT, or somebody who got the master password from someone in facilities or IT." Marcus rubbed his eyes. He'd been staring at logs until the numbers swam. "Claire, I'm going to be straight with you because you hired me to be. This isn't some outside hacker. This is someone with deep access to this building and deep knowledge of your schedule and—" He hesitated. "And your panic attacks. They knew you'd be alone and vulnerable on that floor at that hour. They didn't just guess. They knew. So I've got to ask you a hard question, and I need you not to shut me down when I ask it." Claire looked at him steadily. "Ask. Who knows about the attacks? About the fact that you fall apart when you're alone. Who in your whole life knows that Claire Whitmore isn't made of steel? The question landed hard. Marcus watched her want to deflect it. Watched the reflex to protect the secret rise up in her, the way it had risen up her whole life, and watched her with visible effort choose to answer honestly instead, because she'd hired a man on the promise of truth, and truth cut both ways. Very few people, she said finally. My therapist, who I'd stake my life on. A former assistant who left 3 years ago on good terms, moved to Portland, has no reason to hurt me. She paused, and something crossed her face. And my brother. Marcus went still. You have a brother, Alexander? She said the name like it tasted of metal. Younger. 4 years younger. He knows about the attacks because he's the reason I started having them. She turned away toward the black glass of the window, and when she spoke again, her voice had gone flat and careful, the voice people use for wounds they've decided not to feel. Our father built this company. When he died, he left it to me. Not to Alexander. Me. And Alexander has spent every day of the 11 years since deciding that was a theft. That our father was manipulated or senile, or that I poisoned him against his own son. None of which is true. The truth is simpler and crueler than that. Our father looked at both his children and decided which one could run his life's work, and he chose me. And Alexander has never forgiven either of us for it. Where is he now? On my board. Claire laughed, and there was no humor in it at all. That was the compromise. My father's will gave Alexander a board seat and a substantial stake, but no operational control. So for 11 years my little brother has sat at my table, drawn a fortune he didn't earn, and waited. Watched. Looked for the crack. She turned back to face Marcus. And the crack is my panic attacks, Marcus. That's the one thing that could take this company from me legally. Not scandal. Not failure. The company's never done better. But if the board believed I was mentally unfit to lead, there's a clause. There's always a clause. Incapacity. And if enough directors voted that I couldn't be trusted at the helm because I'm psychologically unstable. She spread her hands. Then control reverts. And guess who's next in line? Alexander. Alexander. Marcus sat down slowly in the chair across from her. His mind was moving fast now, the pieces sliding together with a terrible logic. So Friday night wasn't about ruining you with a sex scandal. Not really. The scandal was just the delivery system. The point was to create a moment. A moment where you'd be found publicly having a full breakdown in a compromising situation, unable to explain yourself, unable to hold it together. A moment your board couldn't unsee. He looked at her. He wasn't trying to make you look guilty. He was trying to make you look broken. And I was just the guy who was supposed to be standing next to the broken thing. Claire was very quiet. Yes, she said, I think that's exactly right. And it almost worked, Marcus said. It came within one decision of working. If you'd let your security call the police if I'd panicked and run. If you'd broken down completely instead of pulling yourself together, there'd have been a police report. A black intruder, a hysterical CEO. And by Monday morning, your whole board would have had the story, and the story would have been, Claire Whitmore had a psychotic break and got a man arrested for a crime that never happened. You'd have been finished, and I'd have been in Cook County, and my daughter'd have been in the system. But it didn't work, Claire said, because you didn't run, and because I didn't break. No, Marcus agreed. It didn't work. Which means... And here he felt the cold settle into his stomach again, the same cold from Friday night. Which means he's going to try again. Harder. Because now he's exposed himself. He's shown his hand. If you ever prove what he did Friday night, he's not just off the board, he's in prison. So he can't stop now. He has to finish it before you finish him. Marcus looked up at her. We just went from him hunting you to us hunting each other. And he's got 11 years of head start and a board seat and the master facilities password. All I've got is a badge and a hunch. You've got me, Claire said. That's the thing I keep trying to make you understand. Marcus leaned forward. You're the target. You can't be my partner in this and be the bait at the same time, because the second he realizes you're onto him, you become the most dangerous person in his world, and he'll stop trying to embarrass you and start trying to end you for real. Right now he thinks Friday was a fluke. He thinks you got lucky. He does not know you've got a maintenance man reading elevator logs in an alcove down the hall. And that little bit of not knowing, that's the only advantage we have. The second we lose it, we lose everything. Claire studied him for a long moment. You've thought about this a great deal. I don't sleep, Marcus said simply. Haven't since Friday. I lie there and I think about Nia in that spare bed, and I think about how close it came, and I think about all the ways it could still go wrong. That's what I do now. I think about the ways it goes wrong so I can get in front of them. He met her eyes. That's the job you hired me for, isn't it? To see what your $4,000 consultants can't. Well, here's what I see. I see a man who's waited 11 years and just took his best shot and missed. And a man like that isn't going to wait 11 more. He's going to move fast, and he's going to move soon, and when he moves, it's not going to look like Friday. Friday was surgical. Next time, if he thinks he's losing, it's going to be a hammer. The office was silent except for the low breath of the climate system. Then we need to move faster than he does, Claire said finally. What do you need? I need to know his access. Everything he can touch in this building, every system, every account, every door. I need to know his schedule, his patterns, who he talks to, who's loyal to him. If he's got help inside, and he's got to have help. No one man does all this alone. I need to know who. Marcus stood. And I need one more thing, and you're not going to like it. Tell me. I need you to keep having your panic attacks where he can see them. Claire's whole body went rigid. Absolutely not. Hear me out. You want me to perform the one thing I've hidden my entire adult life. To hand him the exact weapon he's been trying to steal. To fall apart on purpose in front of the man who wants me declared insane. Her voice had climbed. Do you have any idea what you're asking? Yeah, Marcus said quietly. I'm asking you to trust me. Which is the same thing you asked me Friday night when everything said I was guilty, and you told your men to let me up anyway. He didn't back down. He'd learned that from her. Listen, right now he thinks his plan is still viable. He thinks the attacks are your secret weakness, and one day he'll catch you in one, and it'll be over. As long as he believes that he keeps trying to catch you, which means he keeps setting little traps, and every trap he sets, he exposes himself a little more. But if you suddenly become a fortress, if you never show a crack again, then he knows something changed. He knows you got help. He knows you're hunting. And that's when he stops setting traps and starts swinging the hammer. Marcus spread his hands. I'm not asking you to fall apart, Claire. I'm asking you to let him think the door's still open. Let him keep believing his plan works. Keep him reaching for the bait instead of reaching for the hammer. Because every day he keeps reaching, he leaves one more fingerprint, and sooner or later, he leaves the one we need. Claire stared at him. He watched her fight at every instinct she had, every wall she'd built over 40 years, screaming against the idea of willingly showing weakness to her enemy. And he watched her slowly do the same brutal arithmetic she'd done Friday night, weigh the thing she was terrified of against the thing she needed and choose the need. You're asking me to use the worst thing about me as a lure, she said. I'm asking you to use it as a weapon, Marcus said. There's a difference. He thinks it's your weakness. We're going to make it the thing that catches him. Same as Friday. He thought I was going to be the thing that broke you. Instead, I'm the thing that's going to bury him. He keeps turning your weaknesses into weapons, Claire. I'm just proposing we finally return the favor. Something shifted in Claire Whitmore's face. The fear was still there. It would always be there. Marcus was learning. That was what she'd tried so hard to hide, that the fear never left you, just learned to work with it in the room. But alongside the fear now was something harder and brighter, and Marcus recognized it, because it was the thing that had gotten him off the floor Friday night and kept him upright ever since. It was the decision to stop being the person things happened to. "All right," she said. "We do it your way. But Marcus," she pointed at him, and her voice was pure steel now. "If we're going to dangle me in front of my brother like a piece of meat, then I need to know that the man holding the other end of the rope is not going to let go. Because I've spent my whole life alone in these rooms, and I've survived by trusting no one. And now you're asking me to survive by trusting exactly one person. And if you're wrong about any of this, if you disappear, if you flinch, if you sell me out for a better offer, I don't just lose the company, I lose everything. So look me in the eye and tell me you understand what you're holding." Marcus looked her in the eye. "Friday night," he said, "you had every reason to bury me. The easy thing, the safe thing, the smart thing was to let your men cuff me and let the story be the story. Nobody would have blamed you. Nobody would have ever known. But you looked at a stranger on the floor of your suite, and you decided to see the truth instead of the convenient lie. And that decision saved my daughter from growing up without a father." His voice was low and even and absolutely certain. "I don't forget things like that. I'm not built to. You held the rope for me when letting go would have been easier for you than anything in the world. So you want to know if I'll hold it for you." He shook his head slowly. "There's no version of this where I let go. Not because you're paying me. Not because of the trust you signed. Because you came in when you could have walked away. And I told you Friday why I don't respect people who walk away." He held her gaze. "I'm not walking away." For a long moment, Claire Whitmore did not speak. And then, to Marcus's complete surprise, her eyes went bright, and she turned quickly away toward the window so he wouldn't see. And when she spoke, her voice was rougher than he'd ever heard it. "My father used to say, she managed that you can hire loyalty or you can earn it, and the hired kind runs the moment someone offers more." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, fast embarrassed. "He said the only loyalty worth anything is the kind you can't buy. I never believed him. I thought everyone had a price. I built my entire life on the assumption that everyone had a price." She turned back around, composed again, but her eyes were still too bright. "You'd better not be about to prove me right, Marcus Bennett. I've got a daughter to raise and a stain on my ceiling I can't afford to fix," Marcus said. "Everybody's got a price. Mine's just not a number." He picked up his jacket. "It's a bed for my little girl and a chance to not be invisible anymore. And you already paid it. So we're square. Now tell me everything you know about your brother. Every habit, every weakness, everybody he's ever been close to in this building. If he's got a man on the inside, that man has a name, and that name is our way in." Claire nodded slowly. "There's one," she said. "If he has help, it's one person. Alexander's not clever enough to run the technical side himself. He's a schemer, not an engineer. He'd need someone who knows the building's systems cold. Someone with access. Someone with a reason to hate me." She sat down heavily. 3 years ago, I passed over a man for the head of facilities job. Gave it to an outside hire instead. He'd been here 15 years, and he thought it was his by right. And when I gave it to someone else, he came to my office and told me I'd regret it. She looked up. "His name is Danny Reyes, and he's the one who administers the master facilities account." The room went very quiet. Marcus felt the last piece slide into place, not with satisfaction, but with a cold dread that started in his chest and spread outward, because he knew Danny Reyes. Had known him for 6 years. Had shared a break room with him, eaten lunch with him, covered his shift once when Danny's mother was sick. Danny Reyes had shaken his hand 100 times. "I know him," Marcus said quietly. "Danny's Claire. Danny's a friend. Or I thought he was. He's the one who trained me when I started. He's the one who—" And then the dread turned to ice, because Marcus remembered something. Remembered it with sudden, sickening clarity. "He's the one who told me about the overtime slots. He's the one who put me on the Friday night late shift. 3 weeks ago. Said he was doing me a favor, said he knew I needed the hours." Marcus stood there with his jacket half on and felt the world tilt. "He put me on that shift, Claire. He knew I'd be the tech on call Friday night. He chose me. It wasn't random that I was the one who got that text. Danny made sure it'd be me." Claire's face had gone pale. "Why you?" And Marcus understood that too, all at once, and it was the ugliest thing of all. "Because I was safe," he said, and his voice cracked on it. "Because I'm exactly the kind of man a story like that sticks to. Single. Broke. No family to raise a fuss, no lawyer on speed dial, no one who'd believe me over you. Danny picked me because he looked at all the maintenance techs in this building and figured I was the one nobody would ever come looking for." He set his jaw. He was almost right. He looked up at Claire, and the last of the fear had burned out of him, replaced by something cold and clear and steady as a level. "But he made one mistake," Marcus said. "He picked a man who reads danger for a living. And he picked the one night I decided not to walk away." He pulled his jacket the rest of the way on. "Danny Reyes trained me. He taught me this building. Every system he used against you Friday night, he taught me with his own 2 hands." A grim, almost smile. "So he'd better hope he taught me wrong, because I'm about to use every bit of it to take him and your brother apart." Marcus didn't sleep at all that night, and this time it wasn't the fear that kept him up. It was Danny. He lay on his back in the dark and ran through 6 years of small kindnesses, and now every one of them looked different. Danny covering his shift when Nia had the flu. Danny slipping him the good tools instead of the beat-up ones. Danny leaning against the break room counter with a coffee saying, "You're a good man, Marcus. This building doesn't deserve you." Marcus had believed all of it. He'd needed to believe it, a man that alone in the world held on to the few people who seemed to be in his corner. And now he had to consider that every bit of it might have been a long, patient investment in the day Danny would need a man he could aim like a gun. By morning, Marcus had made a decision, and when he laid it out for Claire in her office at 7, she didn't like it. "You want to keep working with him?" she said flatly. "Keep eating lunch with him. Keep pretending you don't know. I want him to keep thinking I'm exactly who he thought I was Friday night," Marcus said. "The safe one. The one who never sees anything coming. Danny doesn't know I got the job up here means anything real. As far as the whole building's concerned, I'm your—" He grimaced. "Your project. Your midnight mistake she felt too guilty to fire. Nobody thinks I'm actually doing anything. Danny least of all, because Danny picked me because I'm the guy nobody takes seriously." He leaned forward. "So I let him keep believing it. I go back down to the break room. I complain about how weird the new job is, how I just sit in an alcove and push papers, how I don't understand any of it. And I watch him, because sooner or later, Claire, he's going to need to check whether his Friday plan left any loose ends. And when he goes looking, I'll be right there next to him, close enough to see where he looks." Claire didn't answer right away. She walked to her window and stood with her back to him, arms crossed, and when she spoke, her voice was careful. "You understand that this man used you. He looked at your whole life, your daughter, your dead wife, your empty bank account, and he did the math and decided you were disposable. And now you want to sit across a lunch table from him and smile." "Yeah," Marcus said. "I do." "How?" She turned around, and there was something almost angry in her face, but it wasn't anger at him. "How do you sit across from a man who tried to send you to prison and put your daughter in foster care and smile at him and pass him the salt?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You want to know the truth. It's the easiest thing in the world." He looked at his own hands. "Because I spent my whole life smiling at people who thought I was less than them. Foremen who talked to me like I was slow. Tenants who watched me like I'd steal from them. Cops who—" He stopped. "I know how to keep my face still while somebody decides I'm nothing, Claire. I've got 39 years of practice. Danny thought that made me weak. Turns out it's the one skill this whole thing needs." He looked up at her. "The difference is every other time in my life I was smiling because I had no choice. This time I'm smiling because I'm about to win. And I promise you, that's a whole different kind of easy." So Marcus went back downstairs. He took his lunch in the break room at 12:30, the way he always had, and when Danny Reyes came in and clapped him on the shoulder and said, "There he is, the big executive. You too fancy to eat with us now?" Marcus grinned and told him to sit down and shut up, and the two of them ate their sandwiches, and Marcus complained about how boring the new job was, how he just moved papers around and understood none of it. how honestly he half wished he was back fixing elevators, where at least he knew what he was doing. "You'll figure it out," Danny said, watching him a beat too long. "Smart guy like you. So what have they got you doing up there anyway? For the CEO herself?" A casual laugh. "You her right-hand man now." And there it was, the fishing line cast so gently, Marcus almost admired it. He made himself laugh and roll his eyes. "Right-hand man. Man, I sit in a closet-sized office and she's forgotten I exist. I think she just felt bad about Friday. You heard about Friday, right?" Marcus lowered his voice, leaned in, gave Danny exactly what Danny was hoping for a man too foolish to guard his own story. "Whole thing was a mess. Guess there was some emergency call that never went through the system right, and I walk in on her having some kind of, I don't know, she was real upset. And next thing I know, security's got me on the floor. I thought I was going to jail Danny. I really did. She's the only reason I didn't." Danny nodded slowly, and Marcus watched him file it away. Watched the relief that Marcus didn't understand what had happened. And underneath the relief, something colder. The calculation of a man confirming his weapon was still safely blunt. "Crazy," Danny said. "You got lucky." "Real lucky," Marcus agreed and picked up his sandwich, and inside his chest, his heart was a fist. He played that game for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of lunches. 2 weeks of complaining about his boring job and letting Danny think he was still the same clueless man who'd walked into the trap. And in those 2 weeks working nights in his alcove, Marcus began to build the case quietly, patiently, one thread at a time. Priya from IT became his unlikely ally. She was 26 and brilliant and bored out of her mind. And when Marcus came to her with dumb-sounding questions that turned out not to be dumb at all, she started to realize the maintenance man was chasing something real. He never told her what. He just asked her to teach him how the badge system logged access, how the elevator controls talked to the servers, how you'd know if someone had erased a record and what fingerprint that erasure left behind. And Priya, who'd never once been asked to matter by anyone above her pay grade, taught him everything. Here's the thing about deleting a log entry. She told him one night, both of them hunched over her monitor after everyone else had gone. "You can delete the entry, but the system keeps a checksum, a kind of running total. Delete a line, and the total doesn't add up anymore. It's like tearing a page out of a numbered notebook. The page is gone, but you can see a page is missing." She pulled up a screen full of numbers Marcus couldn't read. And on Friday 3 weeks back, the freight elevator log has a gap, a page torn out. Somebody deleted the record of that elevator running, and the deletion happened at 12:04 a.m. Marcus stared at the number. "Right after security showed up, right after they had me on the floor." "Right after," Priya confirmed. "Somebody wiped the elevator record while you were being detained. And here's the part that matters." She clicked, and a small window opened. Deletions on this system require an administrator override, and the override is logged, not what was deleted, but that an override happened, and which admin account authorized it. She turned to look at him. The account that authorized the 12:04 deletion was the master facilities account. "I know," Marcus said quietly. 6 people share it. There's no way to prove which one." "That's what I thought, too." Priya smiled, and it was the smile of a young person who'd found something the grown-ups missed. "But the master account can only be used from a machine that's logged into the facilities network. And every machine on that network has a unique hardware address. The account is shared. The machine isn't." She clicked one more time. The 12:04 deletion came from workstation FAC-07. And FAC-07 is assigned to one person. Marcus's mouth had gone dry. "Danny Reyes." "Danny Reyes," Priya said. "His workstation, his machine. At 12:04 a.m. on the night you got arrested, somebody sitting at Danny Reyes's desk used the master account to erase the record of the elevator that brought you up to the 90th floor." She sat back. "Marcus, what did you get me into?" Marcus looked at the screen for a long time. He had it. He had Danny cold or close to it. A workstation was a workstation. A good lawyer would argue anyone could have sat at Danny's desk, and technically that was true. But it was a thread, a real thread, the first one that didn't dissolve when he pulled it, and it led exactly where Claire had said it would. "I got you into something that's going to matter," Marcus told her. "And I need you to do one more thing, and then I need you to walk away and pretend none of this happened, because it's about to get dangerous, and you've got your whole life ahead of you, and I'm not going to be the reason it goes sideways." "What's the one more thing?" "I need to know if Danny's account has talked to anyone on the board's network. Any emails, any file transfers, anything at all between Danny Reyes and Alexander Whitmore. Because a workstation proves Danny wiped the log. But it doesn't prove why, and it doesn't touch her brother. And Danny's just the hand Priya. I need the head." Priya's face went pale at the name Whitmore. She understood suddenly and completely exactly how high this went, and Marcus watched her weigh her whole young career against the thing he was asking, and he almost told her to forget it, almost pulled her out of it right there. "Give me 3 days," she said instead. It took her 2. She found it on a Thursday night, a chain of encrypted messages, technically deleted, but recoverable from a backup server that Danny hadn't thought to scrub between Danny Reyes's personal account and a burner address that Priya traced through 2 relays to a device that had connected to the building's guest network on 4 separate occasions in the past month. Each of those 4 times, the same device had also connected to the executive floor's private network. Board members had access to that network. And of the board members, only one had been physically present in the building on all 4 of those dates: Alexander Whitmore. The messages themselves were careful. Nobody said, "Let's frame a maintenance man." Nobody was that stupid. But you didn't need them to. "Is the Friday piece in place? Confirm the schedule. She'll be alone after 11. Make sure it's someone clean, someone that sticks. After, wipe everything, and we wait for the board to do the rest." And Danny's replies: "Got a guy. Bennett. Perfect for it, nobody'll look twice. It'll hold." Marcus read "nobody'll look twice" 3 times. He sat in Priya's dark little office and read the words "someone that sticks" and "nobody'll look twice," and something happened in his chest that he'd been holding back for 2 weeks. Not rage exactly, though there was rage in it. It was grief. Grief for the version of himself these 2 men had seen when they picked him. A man so far beneath notice that his ruin wouldn't even require a good story. A man whose daughter's future they'd weighed on a scale and found light enough to spend. Nobody'll look twice. They'd been right about the whole world and wrong about exactly one thing they'd assumed nobody would look twice, included him. That he'd accept his own disposability the way he'd been trained to accept everything else. "Marcus." Priya's voice was small. "You okay?" He realized his hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his knees. "Print it," he said. "All of it. Then delete your copy log out and go home, and don't come back to this until I tell you it's safe. You did good, Priya. You did better than anybody in this building deserved. Now let me carry it from here." He took the pages up to Claire at 10 that night, and he laid them on her glass table, and he watched the most powerful woman in Chicago read the proof that her own brother had tried to strip her of her life's work and destroy an innocent man to do it. He watched her read "someone that sticks." He watched her read her own brother's careful, patient malice laid out in cold text, and he watched her face do something he'd never seen it do, crumple just for a second before she forced it back into place. 11 years, she said quietly. "I knew he resented me. I knew he wanted the company. But I told myself he's my brother. I told myself there was a line he wouldn't cross." She set the pages down. There was no line. There was never a line. He was just waiting for a plan. "Claire, do you know what the worst part is?" She looked up at him, and her eyes were dry now, dry and terrible. "The worst part is nobody'll look twice. That's what he thinks people are. That's what my brother sees when he looks at a man like you, nothing. A thing to be used and thrown away. And the thing is, Marcus, I was raised in the same house he was, by the same father. I could have become exactly that. Some days I worry I am exactly that I've just hidden it better." She stood. "But you know how I know I'm not. Because Friday night, when I saw your face on the floor, some part of me still knew how to see a person. Alexander doesn't have that part anymore. Maybe he never did. And I've spent 11 years feeling guilty that our father chose me over him." Her voice hardened into something final. I'm not going to feel guilty anymore. We're close, Marcus said, but we're not there. Claire, I want to be straight with you about where we actually stand, because I don't want you walking into your board thinking we've got more than we do. What we've got is a workstation that ties Danny to the deleted log and a message chain that ties Danny to your brother and to a plan. It's real. It's damning. But a good lawyer and your brother can afford the best. A good lawyer stands up and says the workstation was accessible to anyone. The messages are out of context. The burner device can't be conclusively tied to Alexander's hand on the keyboard. It's enough to blow him off your board. It might not be enough to put him in prison. And a cornered Alexander who keeps his freedom is more dangerous than one who's already lost. So what do you need? I need him to say it, Marcus said. Out loud. On the record. Him, not Danny. I need Alexander Whitmore to admit in his own words that he did this, because everything else can be argued around. But a man confessing can't. He paused. And there's only one way I know to make a man like that confess. You have to make him think he's already won. You have to make him think it's safe to gloat. Claire understood immediately. She'd been born understanding this. You want to give him the moment he's been waiting for. The moment where he watches me break. I want him to think he's giving himself that moment, Marcus said. There's a difference, and the difference is everything. He pulled a chair close and sat, and laid it out the way he'd been building it in his head for 2 weeks. Your board meets in 9 days. Full board in person, the big quarterly. Alexander will be there. Danny handles the building systems for that meeting, the doors, the AV, the climate, all of it, that's his job. Which means for the first time since Friday, we'll have both of them in the building in position on the same day. He looked at her. So we give them Friday again. We let Alexander believe he's about to get his moment. We let Danny put the pieces in place. And then when Alexander thinks he's finally watching you fall apart in front of your whole board, when he thinks he's won, when he can't help himself, when he steps up to twist the knife, that's when we're recording every word. He'll never confess in front of the board. He's careful. You said so yourself. He won't confess to the board, Marcus agreed. He'll confess to you, alone, because that's what men like him actually want. Claire, it's not really the company. If it was just the company, he'd have taken a buyout years ago. What he wants is the moment. He wants to stand over you and watch you understand that he beat you. He's waited 11 years for it. He is not going to let a plan work perfectly and then deny himself the one thing the whole plan was for. Marcus leaned in. So, we build him a moment. We make him think it's happening, that you're breaking, that the board's turning, that it's finally his. And we make sure that when he steps into that room to gloat, the only 2 people there are him and you, and about 6 microphones he doesn't know about. Claire was silent for a long moment. Then slowly, you want to use me as the bait, again. Except this time I have to actually stand in front of my entire board and pretend to fall apart. Voluntarily. The exact nightmare I've spent my life avoiding. Yeah, Marcus said quietly. I do. And I hate that I do. And I want you to know I've thought about every other way to do this, and there isn't one that ends with him in a cell, instead of coming back at you meaner next year. He held her eyes. But I also want you to hear the other half of it because it matters. You won't be alone in that room, not for 1 second. I'll be in the building. I'll have eyes on you the whole time. The second it goes wrong, I'm through that door. You're not the woman on the floor anymore, Claire. Friday night, you were alone and blindsided. This time you'll know exactly what's coming, and you'll have a man in the walls whose entire job is making sure it stays a performance and never becomes real. There's a difference between being the bait and being the trap. Friday you were the bait and didn't know it. This time, you're the trap, and you'll know every inch of it. She looked at him for a long time. And Marcus watched her make the decision. He'd watched her make twice before. Now the decision to walk toward the thing she was most afraid of, because the alternative was letting the fear keep winning. There's one problem with your plan, she said finally. Danny, he controls the building systems that day. which means the moment I start to break in front of the board, Danny knows it's the plan working, and Danny is watching, and Danny is smart enough to notice if anything's off. If he realizes we're recording, if he sees one thing out of place, he'll warn Alexander and it all falls apart, and then they both know we're hunting them. She shook her head. You can't run a trap that depends on the building's systems when your enemy's hand is on the switch. I know, Marcus said, which is why Danny's not going to be on the switch. Claire looked at him. The night before the board meeting, Marcus said, there's going to be a real emergency in this building, a genuine one. Something in the sub-basement, a water main, a transformer, something that absolutely legitimately requires the head of facilities operations to be down there in person all night, hands-on, because it's a code situation and there's no one else senior enough to sign off. A grim flicker of a smile. I've spent 6 years in the guts of this building, Claire. I know exactly which systems, if they failed, would pull Danny down into that basement and keep him there till morning. And I know exactly how to make one of them fail in a way that looks like bad luck and reads clean on every log. He shrugged. He trained me, remember? He taught me every weak point in this building's body. I'm just going to press on one of them at the right time. You're going to sabotage my building. I'm going to give my building a manageable, non-dangerous, fully repairable problem, Marcus corrected, that happens to require your enemy to spend the night of the board meeting elbow deep in a flooded sub-basement instead of sitting at his workstation watching the trap close. Nobody gets hurt. Nothing gets damaged that I can't fix myself the next day. But Danny Reyes will be exactly as far from that boardroom as I can put him with no cell signal and no access to the executive systems for the whole window that matters. He met her eyes. And with Danny in the basement, the building systems that day run through backup, through a workstation I control. Which means when Alexander steps into that room to gloat, I'm the one holding the switch, not him. Claire studied him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You've become someone else in 3 weeks, she said quietly. The man who was shaking on my floor, and the man sitting here planning a 3-front operation against my brother. I'm not sure they're the same person. They're exactly the same person, Marcus said. That's the thing you keep getting wrong about me, Claire, and it's the same thing Danny and your brother got wrong. He stood and gathered the pages and squared them. I was always this person. I've been running operations my whole life. How to make 40 hours of pay cover, 50 hours of bills. How to get a sick kid to a doctor with no insurance and no time. How to keep a little girl feeling safe in a world that's got no safety in it for people like us. I've been planning 3-front operations since I was 25. Nobody ever called it that because nobody was ever watching. The only thing that's changed in 3 weeks. He tucked the pages into his jacket over his heart next to the trust with Nia's name on it, is that for the first time in my life, somebody handed me a problem worth all of it, and gave me a badge that opens the doors. He walked to the door, and then he stopped and turned back because there was one more thing, and it was the thing that mattered most. There's a part of this I haven't told you, he said, because I wanted the plan solid before I said it so you wouldn't think I was letting it cloud my judgment. He paused. When we take Alexander down, and we will, it can't just be him. Danny goes too, all the way down. Not a firing, not a settlement, a cell. His jaw tightened. And I need you to understand why, because it's not about revenge. And I need you to trust that it's not, or you won't trust me on the rest. Danny Reyes looked at me and saw a man whose whole life was cheap enough to spend. And the reason he could see that the reason it was true, the reason his math worked, is that this world made men like me cheap on purpose, and then trained us to believe it so we'd hold still while we got spent. Marcus's voice was very low and very steady. I held still my whole life, Claire. Friday night was the first time I didn't. And I am never holding still again. Not for Danny, not for your brother, not for anybody who looks at my little girl's father and does the arithmetic and decides he's light enough to throw away. He looked at her. So when this ends, it ends all the way, for both of them. Are we clear? Claire Whitmore stood up from behind her glass table, and she crossed the room, and she held out her hand the second time they had ever shaken on anything, the first having ended with a camera going dark in the corner. "When this ends," she said, "it ends all the way, for both of them. You have my word." Her grip was firm. 9 days, Marcus. Let's build the trap. Neither of them said the thing they were both thinking, that a trap built for a man who'd waited 11 years might not spring the way they planned. That Alexander Whitmore had shown Friday night that he thought several moves ahead. That somewhere in the building, a man who'd already tried once to erase Marcus Bennett was still walking. The halls still smiling, still certain that nobody would ever look twice. Marcus drove home that night and let himself into the walk-up, and stood for a long time in the doorway of Naya's room, watching his daughter sleep in the narrow bed that was still for a few more weeks not really hers. She'd kicked her blanket half off. He crossed the room quietly and pulled it back over her, and she stirred and mumbled, "Daddy," without opening her eyes. "I'm here, baby," Marcus whispered. "Go back to sleep. Daddy's right here." "Good," Nia murmured, and burrowed deeper, and was gone again into whatever safe country children go to when they trust that someone is standing between them and the dark. Marcus stood over his daughter in the quiet, and he thought about nobody'll look twice, and he thought about a basement and a boardroom and 9 days, and he made her a silent promise, the same one he'd been making her every night for 2 years, the one that had gotten harder and more dangerous, but never once wavered. "Nobody's spending you. Not while I'm breathing. Not ever." Then he went to the kitchen table, and he spread out the building's schematics that he'd carried home in his jacket, and under the single bulb, he began quietly and patiently to plan exactly how to break a building without hurting a soul. The 9 days went fast and slow, at the same time, the way they always do before something you can't take back. Marcus spent them living 2 lives. By day, he was the boring executive, nobody eating sandwiches with Danny, complaining about paperwork, letting the whole building keep believing he was harmless. By night, he was something else, hunched over schematics, walking the sub-basement with a flashlight, after everyone had gone, tracing the pipe runs and the transformer feeds and the one particular pressure valve on the secondary water main, that if it were to fail on a Tuesday night, would flood a mechanical room slowly enough to be safe and fast enough to be a genuine code emergency. He tested his timing. He checked his logs would read clean. He rehearsed the whole thing in his head until he could do it in the dark because he'd have to. And in between, he built the other half of it with Priya and with Claire. The recording system, hidden in a conference room, the board never used a room Claire would suggest at the last minute for a private word with her brother. 6 microphones, 2 cameras, all of it running through the backup facilities workstation that Marcus would control, while Danny was trapped 3 floors underground. "Walk me through it one more time," Claire said the night before. They were in her office at 11, and she looked tired in a way Marcus had learned to read, not the tiredness of a long day, but the tiredness of a person about to walk into the thing they'd built their whole life around avoiding. "Tomorrow, 4 p.m., the board convenes," Marcus said. "You run the meeting normal for the first hour. Numbers, projections, all of it. Alexander's watching you the whole time, waiting because he knows Danny will have told him that tonight's the night the plan comes together. Then about an hour in, you start to slip." "I start to slip," Claire repeated. Her voice was flat. "You lose your place in your notes. You repeat yourself. Your hands shake you. Let them see your hands shake. You reach for water and you knock the glass." Small things. Nothing anyone could call a breakdown yet, but enough that the room notices. Enough that Alexander's heart starts going because he thinks it's finally happening. Marcus watched her face. "You give it maybe 10 minutes of that, and then this is the part that has to look real. Claire, this is the part that sells the whole thing. You stop mid-sentence, and you go quiet, and you tell the board you need a moment, and you walk out of that room. And he follows me. He can't not follow you," Marcus said. "It's the thing he's waited 11 years for. He'll give it a minute so it doesn't look obvious, and then he'll excuse himself and he'll come find you. And you'll be in that little conference room, the one nobody uses, the one you'll have told your assistant you're going to sit in alone for a few minutes to collect yourself. And he'll come in, And he'll close the door. Marcus's voice dropped. And then it's just you and him and 6 microphones, and you let him talk. You don't accuse him, you don't tip it. You just let him be who he is. Because a man who's waited 11 years to gloat is going to gloat Claire. You won't have to pull it out of him. You'll have to survive him wanting to say it. Claire was quiet for a moment. And where are you? 2 rooms away, watching every camera hand on the door. If he lays a finger on you, if it goes past words even an inch, I'm through that door before he finishes the motion. Marcus leaned forward. But it won't go there. That's not what he wants. He doesn't want to hurt you with his hands. He wants to hurt you with his mouth. He wants you to understand, so he'll talk. And every word he says is a nail in his own coffin, and he won't feel a single one going in because he'll think he's finally winning. Claire nodded slowly. And then she said the thing Marcus had been waiting 9 days for her to say, the thing he'd known was coming. I'm afraid, she said. Not of the plan, of him. Of standing in a small room with my little brother while he tells me what he really thinks of me. I've spent 11 years never letting him get close enough to say it, and tomorrow I'm going to invite him to. Her jaw worked. I don't know if I can stand there and take it. Marcus didn't rush to reassure her. He'd learned that about her, that empty comfort insulted her, that she'd built a whole life on people telling her what she wanted to hear, and the one thing she actually trusted was a man who'd tell her the truth even when it was hard. You might not be able to, he said quietly. That's the honest answer. It might hurt worse than you're braced for. He's your brother, and he's going to say things brothers know how to say, the things that only land because they come from someone who watched you grow up. He held her eyes. But here's what I know about you, Claire. Friday night, you couldn't breathe. You were on the floor. You were as broken as I've ever seen a person. And you still pulled yourself together enough to save a stranger from going to prison. You did the hardest thing a person can do. You held it together for someone else while you were falling apart yourself. I watched you do it. He paused. So I'm not going to tell you it won't hurt. It'll hurt. But you don't have to not hurt to get through tomorrow. You just have to hurt and keep standing. And you already proved you can do that. You proved it on me. Claire looked at him, and her eyes were bright again, and this time she didn't turn away. When did you get wise, Marcus Bennett? She said softly. I'm not wise, Marcus said. I've just been hurt a lot and kept standing. After a while it looks like the same thing. He stood. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you stop being the woman on the floor. Tomorrow you're the trap. He didn't sleep either, of course. At 2 a.m, he was in the sub-basement alone, flashlight in his teeth, kneeling in front of the secondary water main's pressure valve. He'd walked it a dozen times in his head, and now he did it for real, and his hands were steadier than they'd been on Claire's floor 3 weeks ago, because he knew this. This was the language he actually spoke, pipes and pressure, and the patient mechanical logic of a building's body. He adjusted the valve to a setting that would hold overnight, and then sometime around 3 the next afternoon, quietly begin to fail. Slow enough to be safe. Fast enough to be undeniable. A leak that would trip the mechanical room's water sensor at exactly the wrong moment for Danny Reyes, and exactly the right moment for everyone else. Then he wiped his prints, logged the valve as due for scheduled inspection so the maintenance record would look routine, and went home to hold his daughter for a few hours before the day that would decide everything. The next afternoon, at 3:12 p.m., the water sensor in sub-basement mechanical room C tripped. Marcus was in his alcove when it happened, watching the building's alert system, and he felt the whole plan turn over like an engine catching. The alert went out. Facilities protocol for a Class 2 water event required the head of operations on site in person to assess and sign off before the automatic shutoffs could be cleared, and the head of operations was Danny Reyes. Marcus watched Danny's badge ping down through the building floor by floor into the guts of the tower, into the one place in all of Whitmore Tower where the cell signal died and the executive network didn't reach. At 3:31, Danny Reyes was standing ankle-deep in water in mechanical room C, cursing with no signal and no way to see what was happening 70 floors above him. At 3:34, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Priya. "He's down. He's blind. You're driving." Marcus took a breath and moved to the backup workstation, and for the first time since Friday night, 3 weeks ago, he was the one holding the switch. At 4 o'clock, the board convened. Marcus couldn't be in the room. A maintenance man at the quarterly board meeting would have broken the whole illusion, but he had the cameras. He sat in the dim little control room, 2 doors down from the unused conference room, and watched a wall of monitors, and on the largest one, Claire Whitmore walked to the head of the boardroom table and welcomed her directors, and began in a steady voice to lie with her whole body. For the first hour, she was flawless. She ran the numbers. She fielded questions. She was the Claire Whitmore the world knew, sharp, certain, untouchable. And Marcus, watching, understood the size of what she was doing because he could see the cost of it in the small things the cameras caught and the board couldn't, the white knuckles under the table. The breath she took before each answer, the enormous machinery of will it took to sit in that chair and prepare to voluntarily dismantle the mask she'd worn for 40 years. And he could see Alexander. Alexander Whitmore sat 4 seats down from his sister, and he was a handsome man, well-dressed, easy in his chair, and he watched Claire with an expression of such perfect, pleasant, brotherly attention that Marcus felt sick looking at it. Because underneath the pleasant attention was the thing Marcus had been hunting for 3 weeks, the patient, coiled waiting of a man who believed he was about to watch a lifetime's grievance finally pay out. Every so often, Alexander glanced at his phone, checking Marcus knew for a text from Danny that would never come. At 5:04, Claire began to slip. She did it beautifully. She lost her place in her notes and had to find it again. She answered a question and then, 30 seconds later, half-answered it a second time, as though she'd forgotten. She reached for her water glass, and her hand shook. Marcus saw her make it, shake, saw the control it took to fake a loss of control, and the glass tipped and water spread across the table, and a ripple went through the board, the small collective flinch of people watching something they weren't supposed to see, and Alexander Whitmore leaned forward. Marcus watched him do it, on the monitor, watched the mask of pleasant attention sharpen into something hungrier, watched the man's whole body orient toward his sister like a compass finding north. There it is, Marcus thought. There's what you really are. Claire dabbed at the spilled water with a napkin, and her hands were visibly trembling now, and she looked up at her board and said in a voice that cracked exactly right, "I'm sorry, forgive me. I need a moment. Just give me a moment." And she stood too fast, and her chair scraped, and she walked out of the boardroom with the unsteady quickness of a woman barely holding herself together. The board sat in stunned silence, and Marcus, watching, counted in his head. 1, 2, 3. He got to 41 before Alexander Whitmore murmured something to the director beside him. Marcus couldn't hear it, but he could read the shape of, "Let me check on her. She's my sister," and rose and buttoned his jacket and walked out of the boardroom after her with an expression of tender concern that made Marcus want to put his fist through the monitor. Marcus switched cameras. Now he was watching the small, unused conference room where Claire sat alone at the end of a long table, her back to the door, her shoulders rising and falling. She'd done it. She'd gotten him to follow. Everything from here rode on the next few minutes, and there was nothing Marcus could do but watch and wait and keep his hand on the door of his own room in case it went wrong. The conference room door opened. Alexander stepped in. He closed it behind him. Closed it, Marcus noted, and Marcus's whole body went tight, because a man who closes the door is a man who thinks he's about to say something he doesn't want overheard. "Claire," Alexander said. His voice came through the microphones, warm and soft, full of concern. "Claire, my God, are you all right?" Claire didn't turn around. "I'm fine, Alex. I just need a minute." "You're not fine. I watched you in there." He moved closer, came around the table so he could see her face, and his expression was a masterpiece of brotherly worry. "That wasn't fine. That was Claire. That was like the old days, like after Dad. You haven't looked like that in years." He crouched beside her chair, put a hand on her arm, and Marcus, watching, saw Claire's whole body flinch at the touch and force itself still. "Talk to me. What's happening to you? And Marcus watched Claire Whitmore do the hardest piece of acting of her life. He watched her let her face crumple. He watched her look at her brother, the man who'd tried to destroy her, whose touch she could barely stand, and let her eyes fill and say in a small, broken voice, "I don't know, Alex. I don't know what's happening to me. It's been getting worse. The attacks. Some nights I can't breathe. I fall apart. And I keep thinking, what if it happens in front of them? What if it happens in front of the board?" A tear spilled over. What if I'm not? What if I can't do this anymore? Marcus in the control room held his breath. Because this was the moment. This was where it turned. Either Alexander Whitmore was too careful to take the bait, in which case they had nothing, or he was exactly the man Marcus believed him to be, and he couldn't help himself, and he stepped over the edge. For a long moment, Alexander said nothing. He crouched beside his sister, with his hand on her arm and his face full of concern. And Marcus watched him, and Marcus saw the exact instant the concern flickered. Saw it drop, just for a heartbeat. Saw the pleasant mask slip, and something else look out from behind his eyes, something that had been starving for 11 years and finally smelled the meal. And then, very quietly, Alexander Whitmore smiled. "You can't," he said softly. "That's the thing, Claire. You can't do this anymore. I think we both know that." Claire went very still. "What?" "Look at you." Alexander's voice was still gentle, still warm, and that was the horror of it. He could say these things and keep his voice kind. "You're coming apart. You have been for months. And I've watched it, and I've thought someone has to protect her. Someone has to protect the company. Because you're not well, Claire. You haven't been well since Dad died and put all of this on your shoulders, shoulders that were never strong enough for it." He tilted his head. "He should have given it to me. You know that, don't you? Somewhere in there, under all the—" He gestured at her tears. "Under all this, you know he made a mistake. He looked at his sick, fragile daughter and his son, and he chose wrong, and he ruined both our lives doing it." "Alex," Claire whispered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm going to help you," Alexander said, and now the smile was full and warm and terrible. "I'm saying that after today, after the board watches what I just watched, nobody's going to be able to pretend anymore. They'll see what I've seen, that Claire Whitmore is not well, that she can't be trusted with Dad's company, and they'll do the kind necessary thing. They'll ask you to step down, for your own health." He squeezed her arm. "And I'll be there for you, sis. I'll take the weight off you finally. I'll run things, and you can go somewhere quiet and get the help you need. It's what's best. It's what's always been best." Marcus in the control room was gripping the edge of the desk hard enough to hurt. Almost. Almost. "Say it. Say the one thing." Claire's voice when it came was small and shaking. "You've been Alex the way you're talking. It's almost like you knew this would happen. Like you wanted it." And Alexander Whitmore, drunk on 11 years of waiting, standing over his sister in the moment he'd dreamed of, looked at her tear-streaked face and could not resist the last inch. "Of course I wanted it," he said softly. "Do you have any idea how long I've waited? I've sat at your table for 11 years and watched you take what was mine, and I have waited." His voice dropped to something almost tender, almost loving, which made it worse. "Friday night was supposed to be the end of it, you know. The maintenance man. That was going to be so clean. You found an estate, some nobody standing over you, the police, the scandal. The board would have moved that week. But you had to pull yourself together, didn't you? You had to be strong at exactly the wrong moment." He shook his head, almost admiring. "So we do it the slow way instead. Today. In front of everyone. It doesn't matter that Friday failed Claire. It was always going to end here. It was always going to end with me in Dad's chair and you gone." He smiled. "I just wish you'd stop fighting it. It's undignified." In the control room, Marcus Bennett closed his eyes for 1 second. "Got you. Every word. On 6 microphones. Friday night was supposed to be the end of it. The maintenance man. That was going to be so clean. A confession complete and unmistakable from Alexander Whitmore's own mouth in his own voice, with no lawyer alive who could argue it into something else. But Marcus's relief lasted exactly that 1 second. Because on the monitor something changed in Claire's face. The tears were still there, but behind them something had gone hard and cold and done, and Marcus realized with a jolt of alarm that Claire Whitmore had gotten what she needed, and now she was going to do the thing he'd begged her not to do. She was going to stop acting. "Get your hand off me," Claire said. Her voice had changed completely. Gone was the small broken whisper. This was the CEO, the woman who ran an empire, and she said it with such sudden cold authority that Alexander actually recoiled. "Claire," I said, "get your hand off me, Alexander." She stood, and now she was looking down at him, and the tears on her face had become something else entirely. Not weakness, but fury held at a perfect controlled boil. 11 years. You sat at my table for 11 years and smiled at me, and the whole time you were waiting to do this. And Friday, you used a man, an innocent man, a father. You looked at Marcus Bennett, and you saw someone whose whole life you could throw in a fire to warm your hands, and you didn't think twice, did you? Someone that sticks. That's what you called him. Nobody'll look twice. Marcus, watching, felt his heart stop. No, Claire, no, not yet. Not while it's just you and him in that room. Because he saw what she'd just done. She'd let him know. In her fury and 11 years of held-back rage finally breaking loose. She'd quoted the messages, "Someone that sticks, nobody'll look twice." Words that existed nowhere but in the encrypted chain Priya had recovered. And Marcus watched the understanding arrive on Alexander Whitmore's face like a light coming on. Watched the man's eyes widen. Watched him understand all at once that his sister had not been breaking down at all, that she'd known that she'd been playing him. That there was no version of this where a woman quoting his private messages was the fragile thing he'd thought he was toppling. "You?" Alexander breathed. "You knew. This whole thing, you—" His head snapped toward the corners of the room, searching, and Marcus saw the exact moment he spotted the small dark eye of a camera near the ceiling. "You're recording." And then Alexander Whitmore stopped being a schemer and became something much more dangerous. A cornered man who just watched 11 years of patience turn to ash, who understood he'd just confessed everything, who knew that the woman in front of him held his freedom in her hands and had been holding it the whole time. He lunged. Not toward the door, toward Claire. Marcus was already moving. He'd been out of his chair the instant he saw Alexander's head turn toward the camera, already through his own door, already sprinting down the short hall. And even so, even at a dead run, he heard through the walls the sounds that turned his blood to ice. A chair going over Claire's sharp cry, the ugly scuffle of a bigger body driving a smaller one back. Marcus hit the conference room door with his shoulder, and it flew open, and he took in the whole scene in a quarter second. The overturned chair, Claire backed against the far wall, and Alexander Whitmore, with one hand fisted in the front of her jacket and the other drawn back. His handsome face contorted into something Marcus had seen before on other men, in other rooms, the face of someone who's lost everything, and has decided in the space of a breath to at least make sure the person who took it from him pays. "Hey!" Marcus roared. Alexander turned his head, and in that instant, Marcus crossed the room. He didn't think about it. 6 years of hauling equipment, a lifetime of holding himself still while the world decided he was nothing. All of it came uncoiled at once, and Marcus grabbed a fistful of Alexander's expensive jacket and tore him off Claire, and threw him bodily across the room, and Alexander hit the long table and went sprawling across it, and slid off the far side onto the floor. Marcus put himself between Alexander and Claire. "Don't get up," Marcus said. His voice was very quiet and very level, and it was more frightening than a shout. "I'm asking you nice one time. Don't. Get up." Alexander got up. He came off the floor with something in his hand. Marcus registered it too late, a heavy glass paperweight off the credenza already swinging. And Marcus got an arm up and took the blow on his forearm instead of his temple, and pain exploded white up to his shoulder, and then the two of them were grappling. And Alexander was bigger than Marcus had judged from the cameras, and desperate in the way only a ruined man can be. "You," Alexander snarled, spit-flying, driving Marcus back toward the wall. "You were supposed to be nothing. You were supposed to go to prison. Who do you think you are?" And Marcus, with his back to the wall and a rich man's hands at his throat and his forearms screaming, and Claire shouting his name, found somewhere in himself a calm so total it surprised him. "I'm Nia Bennett's father," Marcus said, and he drove his knee up into Alexander Whitmore's gut, and when the man folded, Marcus took him down to the floor. The way you take down anything that's trying to hurt someone, you've promised to protect with everything, and without apology, and he pinned him there, chest to the carpet arm behind his back, and he held him, and Alexander thrashed and screamed and could not move an inch, and the door filled with people. Security, real security, alerted by Priya the second the struggle started. Board members drawn by the shouting crowding the doorway with their mouths open. And Claire upright, disheveled, her jacket torn, where her brother had grabbed it, but standing on her own, looking down at her brother pinned to the floor by the maintenance man he'd tried to throw away. "It's over, Alex," Claire said. Her voice didn't shake at all now. "Every word you said in this room is recorded. Friday night, the plan, all of it. You confessed to a room full of microphones, and half my board just heard you scream it while you tried to strangle me." She looked at the stunned directors in the doorway, and then back down at her brother. 11 years you waited to take Dad's company, and you lost it in 11 minutes in a room you closed the door on yourself. Alexander Whitmore stopped struggling. He lay with his cheek pressed to the carpet, breathing hard, and something went out of him, the last of the plan, the last of the patience, 11 years collapsing into nothing under the weight of one man's knee. And he began horribly to laugh, a broken wheezing sound with no humor anywhere in it. "You still don't get it," he gasped. "Even now, you think it was ever about the company." He turned his head as far as he could, one eye finding his sister. "Dad chose you, that's all. That's the whole thing. He looked at both of us, and he chose you. And I have spent my entire life trying to understand what you had that I didn't." The laughter died. "I still don't know. I never figured it out." And Claire Whitmore looked down at her brother for a long moment, and when she answered, there was no triumph in her voice at all. Only something old and tired, and almost sad. "I'll tell you what I had, Alex," she said quietly. "Right up until 11 minutes ago, I still hoped I was wrong about you. That's the whole thing. That's what Dad saw. Not that I was stronger, that I still had something in me that could hope for the best in people." She turned away. "You lost that a long time ago. Maybe you never had it. And that not the company, not the chair, that's what he chose me for. And you're the only person alive who could have proven him right, and you just did." She looked at Marcus, still pinning her brother to the floor. Blood running from his forearm, where the paperweight had caught him, holding a man twice his social worth down against the carpet, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Let security take him," she said gently. "You've done enough. You've done more than enough. Let go now, Marcus. It's over. You can let go. You can let—" And Marcus Bennett looked up at her and held her eyes, and slowly, as the real security officers moved in and took hold of Alexander Whitmore's arms, he let go. They took Alexander Whitmore out through the executive lobby in handcuffs, past the reception desk where he'd walked in like a king 1,000 times, and not one of the board members who'd trailed into the hallway said a word to him as he passed. Marcus stood in the doorway of the little conference room, with a wad of napkins pressed to his bleeding forearm, and watched the man who'd tried to spend his daughter's future go by with his head down, and he waited to feel something triumph maybe, or the hot satisfaction he'd imagined on all those sleepless nights. And what he actually felt standing there was tired. Just tired and quiet, and glad it was over. Danny Reyes was arrested that same night. They found him still in the sub-basement, still ankle-deep in the water Marcus had let loose. And when the detectives came down the stairs with their badges out, Danny looked up at them, and then past them at Marcus Bennett, standing at the top of the stairs. And Marcus watched the understanding arrive on his old friend's face. That the boring, harmless, disposable man he'd fed to the machine 3 weeks ago had been the one who'd built the machine that took him. "Marcus," Danny said. His voice echoed off the wet concrete. "Marcus, come on. It's me. We're friends. Whatever they told you." "You put me on the Friday shift," Marcus said quietly. 3 weeks ago, you looked me in the eye across the break room table, and you told me you were doing me a favor because you knew I needed the hours. He came down 2 steps. I covered your shift when your mother was sick, Danny. I gave you my good gloves that winter, yours split. 6 years I thought you were the one person in this building who saw me as a man. His jaw tightened. And you saw me clearest of anybody. You saw a man so far down, nobody would look twice when you set him on fire. You weren't wrong about the world, Danny. You were just wrong about me. Marcus, please. Her name was going to be in a foster file, Marcus said. My daughter. That's what your favor was going to cost. You knew that. You did the math on my little girl, and you decided she was worth it. He shook his head slowly. I don't hate you. I keep waiting to, and it won't come. But I'm not going to save you either. You're going to answer for what you did all the way down. I told her it ends all the way for both of you. And it does. He turned and walked up the stairs, and he didn't look back. And behind him, he heard the detectives read Danny Reyes his rights over the sound of dripping water. The weeks that followed moved fast. Alexander's confession. 6 microphones. 2 cameras, half the board, as ear witnesses to a man screaming his own guilt while he tried to strangle his sister, was the kind of evidence that doesn't go to trial so much as it goes to sentencing. His lawyers, the best money could buy, looked at the recording and advised him to take a deal, and he took it because there was nothing else to take. Conspiracy attempted extortion assault. Danny Reyes, facing the same evidence, plus the workstation logs Priya had recovered, cut his own deal and gave up every detail of how the Friday plan had been built, which only buried Alexander deeper. And Claire Whitmore did the thing that surprised everyone, including Marcus, suspected herself. She could have buried it all. That was what her instincts, her lawyers and 40 years of survival told her to do. Settle it quiet. Seal the records. Let the story die in a boardroom. Protect the one secret she'd spent her whole life protecting. Instead, 3 weeks after her brother was let out in handcuffs, Claire Whitmore called a press conference, and she stood in front of a bank of cameras, and she told the truth. Marcus watched it from the back of the room, and he watched her hands, and this time they didn't shake. For most of my adult life, Claire told the assembled reporters, I've hidden something. I have anxiety. I have panic attacks. There have been nights I couldn't breathe. Nights I fell apart alone in my office because I was terrified that if anyone knew they'd decide I wasn't fit to do this job. She paused. My own brother built an entire plan around that fear. He believed, and he was almost right, that if the world saw me struggle, the world would decide I was weak and take everything from me. For years I believed the same thing. That's why I hid it. She looked directly into the cameras. I'm done hiding it. I have panic attacks, and I run this company, and both of those things are true, and neither one cancels the other out. Strength was never about not struggling. I used to think it was. I don't anymore. Strength is what you do while you're struggling. It's whether you keep standing. And I've kept standing through the worst night of my life, through my own brother's betrayal, through all of it, and I'm still here. A breath. If there's a shareholder or a board member who thinks that makes me unfit to lead, you know where to find me. But I suspect most of you have struggled with something too, and I suspect you're tired of pretending you haven't. I know I am. The story, when it broke, did not destroy Claire Whitmore. It did the opposite. The company's stock, which her enemies had predicted would crater on the news, held steady and then climbed because it turned out the market valued a leader who told the truth more than it feared one who struggled. Letters poured in, thousands of them, from employees and strangers. People who'd hidden their own struggles, their whole careers, thanking her for saying the thing out loud. Claire read every one. She told Marcus later that it was the first time in her life she'd felt like the money and the power were actually good for something. Marcus's life changed too, though it took him longer to believe it. Claire made the special operations title permanent and real, and then 6 months later, she made it something bigger. Director of Building Safety and Operations, the whole job. All of it the position Danny Reyes had once been passed over for, and Marcus had never in his life imagined he'd hold. The salary was more money than Marcus had ever thought he'd see. But the money he found wasn't the thing that changed him. The thing that changed him was walking into the building in the morning and having people say his name. "Morning, Mr. Bennett," the receptionist said. The vice presidents nodded to him in the elevator. The whispers that had followed him for the first weeks, the one from Friday night, had turned into something else entirely, because the whole building knew now what had really happened. Friday night knew that the maintenance man they'd all stepped around like a wet floor sign had been the one who'd seen the truth when everyone else saw the lie, who'd saved the CEO, when her own security had him face down on the marble. Priya got a promotion out of it too. A real one. A jump 3 pay grades into a security systems role she'd more than earned. And Marcus made sure everyone in the building knew that the case that saved the company had been cracked by a 26-year-old IT tech who'd stayed late for a man she barely knew. "You didn't have to do that," Priya told him when the promotion came through. "Put my name on it. You could have kept it." Marcus just looked at her. "You spent your whole time in this building being invisible," he said. "I know what that's worth. And I know what it's worth to have somebody finally say your name in a room that matters. I wasn't going to be one more person who took your work and left you in the dark. Not after what you did." Priya, who had never once been thanked like that by anyone above her, had to look away. But the change that mattered most, the one Marcus would remember when he was old, the one he'd think about on quiet nights for the rest of his life, happened 3 months after Alexander went away on an ordinary Saturday when Claire Whitmore met Nia. Marcus hadn't planned it. Claire had asked gently more than once, and Marcus had kept the two worlds apart out of an old and careful instinct, because Nia was the thing he protected, and Claire was the world he'd walked into to protect her, and he wasn't sure the two should touch. But Nia had started asking about the lady her father worked for, the one you saved Daddy. And finally, on a bright Saturday, Marcus brought his daughter to the park near Claire's building, and Claire came in jeans and a plain coat, looking like nobody at all. And she crouched down to Nia's level, the way Marcus had crouched down to hers. "You're Nia," Claire said. Nia studied her with the frightening seriousness of a 9-year-old. "You're the billionaire," she said. "Daddy said you were sad and he helped you not be sad." Marcus started to correct her. "Nia, that's not exactly..." But Claire held up a hand and she looked at Nia and she answered the child with a truth Marcus hadn't expected. "That's exactly right," Claire said. "I was very sad and very scared, and your dad walked into the room when everybody else would have walked out. And he stayed. He stayed even though it was dangerous for him to stay. Do you know why he did that?" Nia shook her head. "Because of you," Claire said. "Because your dad decided a long time ago that he was going to be the kind of person who comes in when someone needs help, because he never wanted you to grow up in a world where people walk away. He stayed with me because of the man he wanted to be for you." Claire's voice went a little rough. "You have a very good father, Nia. I've met a lot of powerful people in my life. Your dad is the best man I've ever known. I need you to grow up knowing that." And Nia, 9 years old, looked up at her father standing there with his throat working and his eyes too bright, and she said with the simple certainty of a child who'd never once doubted it, "I know." That was the moment Marcus Bennett stopped being able to speak for a little while. The four of them. Because Priya had come too drawn into the strange little family that the worst night of all their lives had somehow built, spent that Saturday in the park, and Marcus watched his daughter teach a billionaire how to play a clapping game. Watched Claire Whitmore laugh, really laugh, in a way Marcus had never once seen in the tower, and he understood that Claire had told him the truth all those months ago in her office. That the thing she'd been protecting behind all those walls wasn't the company. It was this. The simple human thing that money couldn't buy, and power couldn't reach, and a whole life spent trusting nobody had kept her from ever having. An afternoon in the park, a child who wasn't afraid of her. A friend. A place to just be a person. "Can I tell you something?" Claire said to Marcus later, while Nia and Priya raced each other across the grass. "I've been trying to figure out how to say it for months, and I keep getting it wrong, so I'm just going to say it plain." She watched the girls run. "You didn't just save my company, Marcus. You saved my company and my brother's, the one who ruined it for himself, and I've made my peace with that. But that's not the thing I owe you for." She turned to look at him. "You saved me from becoming him." Marcus frowned. "Claire, I mean it. I was on that road. Trust nobody, use everybody. Everyone has a price, protect the empire at all costs." That was Alexander's whole religion, and it was becoming mine, and I couldn't see it because I told myself I was doing it to survive. She shook her head. And then a maintenance man walked into the worst moment of my life and treated me like a human being when he had every reason in the world to run. And I looked at him and I remembered there was another way to be. That's what you gave me. You reminded me I still had a soul in there somewhere. And you'll never fully understand how close I was to losing it. Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching his daughter run in the sun. You want to know what you gave me? He said finally. For 39 years I was invisible. And I told myself I'd made my peace with it, that being the man nobody saw was just the deal, just the price of being who I was born where I was born, looking how I look. I told myself it didn't hurt anymore. He swallowed. And then Friday night, being invisible, almost cost me my daughter, because two men looked at me and saw nothing, and figured they could burn me down, and nobody would notice. And you were the one person in that whole building who looked at the nothing everyone else saw, and saw a man. He turned to her. You didn't save my life that night, Claire. You saved it by seeing it, by deciding I was worth seeing, and I'll spend the rest of mine grateful for it. They stood there, the two of them, and neither one said anything else because there wasn't anything else that needed saying. Across the grass, Nia shrieked with laughter and tackled Priya into a pile of leaves, and the late sun came down warm over all of them. And for a long moment, the billionaire and the man who used to be invisible just stood side by side and watched a child play two people from two worlds that were never supposed to touch, bound together now by a single night and a single choice. Marcus Bennett had walked into the wrong room on the worst night of his life, and it had nearly destroyed him. But he had also, in that same moment, made the only choice that had ever really mattered. The choice to stay, when every reason in the world told him to run, the choice to help a stranger on the floor. Because a man who walks away is a man who lets his own daughter grow up in a world without mercy in it. That one choice had cost him everything he was afraid to lose, and then given him back more than he'd ever dared to want. A job with his name on it. A home that was truly his and Nia's, with a bed that was hers, in a room that was hers, in a life where her father came home every single night. A friend in Priya. A strange, unlikely family that had grown up out of the ashes of the worst thing that ever happened to any of them. And the knowledge, the bone-deep, unshakable knowledge that he had never been nothing. That the men who'd looked at him and seen something disposable had been wrong about the one thing that mattered most. That a father who chooses to stay, who chooses to come in, who chooses to see other people as human, even when the world refuses to see him that way, that man is not invisible and never was. He was simply waiting for one person to finally look. People are not defined by their wealth or their titles or the mistakes that get pinned on them in the dark. They are defined by one thing and one thing only, what they choose to do when someone needs them and no one is watching. Marcus Bennett chose to stay. And that choice, that single quiet world-changing choice, was the truest measure of the man he had always been.